In 1997, a man stepped into a machine he built inside his own garage in rural Ohio and vanished without a trace. No body, no note, no explanation. Just a 6-foot circular burn pattern scorched into the concrete, melted copper across the floor, and a toolbox with a handwritten note that read, "It's not about time, it's about how you see things." The world assumed Mike Markham was dead. His neighbors assumed it. The county sheriff assumed it. Even the people who had followed his story for years on late-night radio eventually stopped talking about him and assumed it too. Then, in October of 2022, 29 years later, a man knocked on the door of a farmhouse in rural Ohio, carrying a wooden box filled with journals, diagrams, and a single Polaroid photograph that should not have been possible to take. He was older than anyone expected, worn down in a way that went beyond years. And the first thing he said when the door opened was not an apology or an explanation. It was a warning. He told the couple who answered that they needed to write down everything he was about to say before he left, because by morning, they would not be able to remember his face. Mike Markham grew up in rural Missouri in the 1970s. No university education, no formal physics training, no funding, no lab, no mentor. What he had was a dangerously specific obsession with electricity and enough stubbornness to act on it. He taught himself electronics from library books. He scavenged transformers from junkyards. He spent every free hour of his adolescence and early adult life building anything that could throw a spark or move a current, just to understand how it worked. By his late 20s, he had wired his garage into something resembling a private laboratory. And sometime in the early 1990s, that obsession led him somewhere no textbook had ever mapped. He built a Jacob's ladder, 2 metal rods arranged in a V-shape, high voltage applied at the base, an arc of electricity climbing upward between them. Standard physics equipment, the kind of thing you see in old science films. Nothing unusual about it. But one night, working alone, Mike positioned a cheap laser pointer to shine directly through the climbing arc. The hum of the transformers shifted pitch. The arc, which should have been chaotic and unstable, tightened, steadied, became something almost deliberate. And then Mike noticed something no textbook had ever described. A steel washer sitting on the workbench near the arc flickered, not moved by vibration, not knocked by airflow. It was there, and then for a fraction of a second, it wasn't. And then, it was back. Exactly where it had been, as if nothing had happened. Except the air in the garage smelled sharper, ozone, and something else Mike couldn't name, something that made the hair on his arms stand completely straight. He froze, tried it again. Coins, screws, small metal objects placed carefully between the rods, and sometimes, for just a heartbeat, they vanished. No sound, no flash, no movement. Just a brief and impossible absence. A hole in reality where a solid object had been a moment before, and then the object was back. That was the moment Mike Markham's life split in two. Everything before and everything after. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now because this story is nowhere close to over, and what comes next is the part that changes everything. In January of 1995, Mike picked up the phone and called Coast to Coast AM, the legendary late-night radio program hosted by Art Bell, a man who had taken calls from every variety of impossible claim for years. Mike was nervous, stumbling over words, backtracking, starting sentences over. He told Art he had built a device in his garage that could make objects disappear from reality for fractions of a second and reappear completely unchanged. Art listened. Then he asked the question that mattered. How do you know it's actually disappearing? Could it just be an optical illusion from the arc? Mike's answer made Art go quiet. I know it disappears, Mike said, because I can feel it. When the field hits right, everything in the garage feels wrong. The air feels like it's holding its breath. And I'm not the only one who notices. My dog won't come near the garage anymore. Birds won't land on the roof. Something about that field makes living things want to be somewhere else entirely. Dead air on the line. A real pause. Then Art said carefully, Mike, I want you to document everything. Get witnesses, record video, call me back. And that was the beginning of something that should have stayed in a garage in Missouri. Over the next year, Mike's experiments escalated in ways that should have frightened him more than they did. He wasn't satisfied with making objects flicker for a fraction of a second. He wanted to understand it, control it, amplify it, and for that, he needed more power, far more than his scavenged equipment could deliver. In the summer of 1995, he stole 6 industrial transformers from a rural electrical substation and wired them directly into his garage. When he fired the system up, it drew so much current, it caused a brownout across several neighboring properties. Lights flickered for a quarter-mile in every direction. Utility investigators traced the surge straight to his address. Mike was arrested. 60 days in county jail. And here's the catch. Those 60 days made him worse. He spent every waking hour in that cell sketching diagrams, refining calculations, building a cleaner version of the system in his head. He walked out more obsessed than when he walked in. By late 1995, Mike had rebuilt everything legally, purchased components, better control mechanisms, more precise laser stabilization. And when he called Art Bell again, Art noticed something immediately. Mike's voice had changed, darker, faster, almost desperate. "Objects aren't just flickering anymore, Art," Mike said. "They're gone for seconds, sometimes longer. And when they come back, sometimes they come back wrong." He described placing a wooden block between the arcs. It vanished for 3 full seconds. Just the hum of the transformers and the sharp crack of electricity filling the space where something solid had been. When the block reappeared, Mike picked it up. It was ice cold, far colder than the surrounding air, as if it had been somewhere else entirely, somewhere freezing. He tested with a flower. It disappeared and came back wilted and dry, as if days had passed instead of seconds. And then Mike said something that made Art Bell stop cold. He had tested with a mouse, placed it between the arcs. The mouse vanished for 5 seconds. When it reappeared, it was alive but wrong, spinning in circles, slamming itself against the walls of its cage, refusing food, refusing water. It died 2 days later. "Mike," Art said, and you could hear something shift in his voice, something between fear and frustration. "You need to stop experimenting alone. Contact real scientists. Get oversight. This is beyond what one person should be doing in a garage in Missouri." Silence on the line. Then Mike, quietly, "I can't stop now, Art. I'm too close." He was right. He was close. But what he was close to wasn't what he thought. In late February of 1996, Mike made his final call to Coast AM. And what he said that night shocked even Art Bell's audience, a crowd that had heard everything. Mike said he had enlarged the field. It wasn't just affecting small objects anymore. He could step partially into it himself. And when he did, time felt different. "It's like everything slows down except you," Mike said. "You can see things moving in slow motion. You can move between seconds. And when you step out, you realize more time has passed outside than you experienced inside. Like you were gone longer than you felt." Art Bell asked the question everyone listening was thinking. "Mike, are you telling me you've built a time machine?" A long pause, then, carefully, "I don't know if it's time travel, but it's something. The field disrupts normal perception or normal reality. I can't tell which, but I'm close, Art. I just need more power and a better stabilizer." Art tried to pull him back, bring in scientists, work within the system. But Mike's paranoia had taken root by then. He described cars parked on his road that didn't belong there, government surveillance, people watching the property at night. The call ended without resolution. And that was the last time Art Bell ever spoke with Mike Markham. On the night of March 18th, 1997, neighbors reported a power surge, a smell of burning electrical insulation, and a muffled thudding sound coming from the direction of Mike's property. By the time anyone investigated, the garage was already ash. Firefighters found melted copper, destroyed transformer housings, and a 6-foot circular burn pattern scorched into the concrete floor with a precision that fire investigators could not attribute to any standard combustion pattern. No body was recovered, no remains of any kind. Just a metal toolbox sitting outside the structure, undamaged, with a handwritten note inside. "It's not about time, it's about how you see things." The county sheriff ruled it an accidental death. Mike Markham was declared dead in absentia 3 years later. For almost 3 decades, that was where the story ended. Then Andrew and Melanie Carter bought a farmhouse in rural Ohio in 2021. They were not people looking for anything unusual. They were a young couple looking for more space. a place to garden, somewhere quiet. In their first week of moving in, Melanie found a loose board in the attic floor. Beneath it was a wooden box. Inside the box were 2 leather-bound journals filled with handwritten calculations and diagrams, a series of folded technical drawings, a sealed envelope marked open when you understand what you are holding, and a single Polaroid photograph of the front of the very house they had just moved into, taken from the driveway, dated on the back in faded pen, 2019, 2 years before they purchased the property, 2 years before they had any connection to this address whatsoever. There was also a type note. Andrew, Melanie, thank you for taking care of this. Electromagnetic field stability optimal, safe storage location. They will find it when the time is right. Andrew and Melanie posted about it on Reddit. The post went viral within 48 hours. People who had followed the Mike Markham story for decades recognized the handwriting immediately, the style of the diagrams, the specific terminology in the journals. And 3 weeks later, Andrew's phone rang. No caller ID. The voice on the other end was tired and worn, but unmistakable to anyone who had ever listened to those old coast-to-coast recordings. "This is Mike Markham," the voice said. "I hear you found my box. I'd like to explain what happened. Can I come visit?" He arrived on a cool evening in October of 2022, 59 years old, the right age if he had aged normally since 1997. But he looked far older, weathered, hollowed out, like a man worn down by something no one else could see or describe. What he told Andrew and Melanie over the next several hours was not what any of them expected, because the answer was not time travel, not in the way anyone had imagined it. And get this, the truth was stranger and far more disturbing than any theory anyone had proposed in 29 years. "The machine didn't move me through time," Mike told them. "It desynchronized me from everyone else. I was still here, same places, same moments, same physical world. But I was out of phase. Like a radio tuned slightly off frequency, you can still hear the music, but it's fuzzy, distant. You're present, but not quite there." He described the night of the fire in detail. March 1997, the 3rd generation of his machine. The field had stabilized in a way it never had before, and Mike, in a moment of reckless confidence, stepped fully into it. No flash of light, no sensation of movement, just a quiet, sickening feeling of disconnection. Like the world had shifted slightly to the left, and he had stayed in place. When he stepped out, everything looked the same. But hours had passed. The machine had overheated and caught fire. Mike had escaped the structure. But when he tried to contact people, something was deeply and fundamentally wrong. Friends recognized his face, but couldn't place his name. His landlord remembered renting to someone, but not the details. Phone calls reached disconnected numbers that he was certain had been active the day before. It was as if Mike's existence had been partially erased from other people's ability to perceive him. Not from reality itself, from memory. "I didn't disappear," Mike said. "I became hard to find, hard to remember. Like your brain couldn't quite hold on to the idea of me. And every time I tested the machine on myself after that, it got worse. I became a little less real to everyone else each time. Jobs didn't last. Coworkers forgot he worked there within days of him leaving a room. He couldn't maintain a bank account because clerks couldn't remember opening one. He drifted for years. Cash jobs, temporary rooms, places where nobody needed to remember him for long. And all the while, he kept researching, trying to understand what he had done to himself. What he eventually discovered was worse than anything he had feared. The machine hadn't manipulated time. It had manipulated something far more fundamental: perception, memory, and what Mike described as the quantum probability states that determine whether a person can be observed, acknowledged, and held in the minds of other conscious beings. "Every person exists," he told the Carters, "because others remember them. Memory creates reality. And I damage my ability to be remembered. You can see me right now. We're talking. But it's fragile, and it's getting worse." The Carters asked the obvious question. Why come back now? Mike said he was running out of time in the most human way possible. Not because of physics, but because each exposure had deepened the effect. He could barely remain coherent to anyone for more than a few hours before the forgetting began. Soon he would become completely unmemorable, present but imperceptible, existing in the spaces between people's attention. He had planned this moment years ago, hidden the box, waited for the right people to find it. People who would document everything before he slipped completely beyond reach. Before he left, he asked the Carters 3 things. Send the journals to a private research archive, people who would study the work without recklessly replicating it. Lock the attic because some of the remaining equipment was still magnetically active, and never try to contact him again. They agreed. Mike stood up, thanked them, and walked out the front door. And this is the part that will stay with you. Andrew and Melanie both described the same experience. The moment Mike stepped through that door and into the night, they had to actively concentrate to remember what he looked like. His face began dissolving in their minds almost immediately, like trying to hold water in their hands, features blurring, details sliding. Within minutes, Melanie grabbed a notepad and started writing down everything she could still recall, because even as she wrote, the details were already going. The color of his jacket, gone. The shape of his hands, gone. Andrew found himself standing in the kitchen, staring at the wall, trying to remember the sound of Mike's voice. He couldn't. Within an hour, they were reading their own handwriting like a stranger's notes. The words were theirs. They recognized the pen, the paper, even a coffee stain on the corner of the page. But the memory behind the words was dissolving. Not gone exactly. Thinning, like fog burning off a field in the early morning, leaving nothing behind. Within a week, they had to read those notes just to reconstruct the conversation at all. The emotion of it, the awe, the weight of what Mike had told them was fading into something vague and formless. Like waking from a dream you know was important but cannot describe, no matter how hard you try. Now, years later, they say the encounter feels like something that happened to someone else entirely. They know it was real because the journals are there, the Polaroid is there, their own handwritten notes are there. But the living memory of sitting across from Mike Markham, hearing his voice, watching his face, it is almost completely gone. That is what unmemory looks like, not forgetting exactly. Something worse. The slow, quiet erasure of a person's presence from your mind while the evidence of their existence sits right in front of you, unable to do anything about it. Since then, there have been occasional unverified sightings. A man matching Mike's description asking unusual questions in university physics departments, a figure at a conference who introduced himself as Mike Markham, but whom no attendee could clearly recall afterward. Reports from shelters of a man with deep technical knowledge who never stayed long enough for anyone to remember his name. Traces, echoes, each sighting a little hazier than the last. Each witness a little less certain they saw anyone at all. Somewhere, Mike Markham is still out there, still breathing, still moving, still present in a world that has nearly stopped being able to notice him. A man who found a way to break reality and watched reality break him back. The machine worked, just not the way he expected. And the price was something that makes time travel look simple. He did not die. He did not travel. He just became impossible to hold on to. A face dissolving in every room he leaves. A name that slips off the tongue before you finish saying it. A ghost made entirely of flesh and blood, haunting a world that has quietly, permanently, and completely forgotten how to see him. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the stories on this channel don't just tell you what happened. They show you what should never have been possible. And we are just getting started.